Great. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm Amanda Berkson-Shilcock with National Skills Coalition. I'm delighted to be co-presenting today with the awesome Michael Matos from Scale It, formerly the Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition and the Illinois Digital Learning Lab. So you'll hear more from Michael coming up. I do want to say that we've uploaded our slides from this presentation, so you can download them from the conference app at any point following this session. So we're going to go pretty quickly through my opening segment here so we can get into Michael's more detailed segment. And if you feel like we flashed past anything too quickly, you will be able to go back and look at the slides later. Next slide, please. So what do we know about workers' digital skill needs and how to support them? I don't have to tell anyone here that the pandemic really brought home a very new reality for all of us who hadn't already been living that reality in many respects beforehand. Next slide. So we really got brought home to us in a whole new way that everyone needs digital skills for telehealth appointments, for helping their K-12 students with homework, for searching for jobs. Many of us had clients who were laid off or furloughed from jobs early in the pandemic. They couldn't get back to their job until they participated in online COVID safety training, but they needed digital skills and digital access to participate in that training. So we all had a crash course starting in March 2020 of the ways in which foundational digital skills are kind of a threshold challenge for being able to get into or get back into the labor market. Next slide, please. We also had kind of a crash course in how fast incumbent workers' digital skills were changing on the job. The pandemic really accelerated planned technological change very quickly. I have talked to logistics officers who work at a major port who said, oh, we were doing paper delivery manifests before the pandemic, and then in the space of about a week, everything switched over to our electronic delivery manifests, and our staff had to get upgraded. Oh, we're a trucking company, and our dispersed workforce of truckers all over the country were doing their payroll app manually beforehand. Now they all have to do it from their smartphones, and our supervisors are spending a ton of time on the phone with our truckers all over the country, helping them navigate that. So that really fast, compressed change of technological advancement in the workplace then affected incumbent workers. And so we saw that showing up in the WIOA system, both with dislocated workers or workers who've been laid off, but also showing up in new workers being onboarded into industries that suddenly had different requirements, right? If you were a home health aide or a certified nurse aide, and before the pandemic, you needed some basic skills with an iPad, but post-pandemic, you had to be able to help your home health aide client navigate a telehealth appointment. So all of a sudden, you're an advanced telehealth navigator, not just a home health aide. So those are examples of the kinds of changes that we saw happening really quickly in the labor market when the pandemic started. Next slide. So we see that things are changing particularly fast for entry-level workers. I've given some examples already. We certainly see this showing up over and over again in retail. Next slide. In construction, I've talked to frontline construction worker companies that have to have their workers being able to use blueprint technology apps to submit a work order change on a building job. Many of these workers don't speak English as a first language, might not have a lot of formal education. So it's really a challenge across the labor market. Next slide. We see in particular that it's a major issue for small and mid-sized businesses. And those of us who've been in the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act system for a long time, we know that these small businesses depend on the public workforce system as part of their talent pipeline, right? They are not large enough to have an in-house upskilling program in most cases. They are not large enough sometimes to even have an in-house HR person, right? Sometimes it's the head of the company who's running around in his little 15 or 20 person company or her 15 or 20 person company trying to do everything. So that's the landscape that we're trying to do this work in. Next slide. We also have some hard data on what the baseline of workers' digital skills look like before the pandemic. Next slide. I'm about to share a couple of quick slides from an assessment called the PIAAC, which is done on US workers every few years. This data is from before the COVID pandemic, and it focuses on people who are working age and who were employed at the time of the survey. Next slide. So the take-home message here is that 31% of US workers have few or no digital skills. That means they might not feel comfortable downloading and installing a mobile app on their phone. They might not feel comfortable sorting emails into different folders. They might not feel comfortable creating a spreadsheet and putting different rows or columns in it. That's the level of foundational digital skills we're talking about. That's a lot of people, right? And a lot of these folks are nevertheless employed in jobs that require digital skills. And we'll talk in a minute more about what that looks like. Next slide. Let me tell you a little bit more about who the folks are who have digital skills needs. My guess is for those of you in the WIOA system, this is not going to be a surprise, right? The structural barriers in our society that mean that people have barriers to employment exist all over again with digital skills. But let me start with one important point. On the green bars here are showing people between the ages of 16 and 24 and 25 and 34. What this slide is telling you, on the left-hand side are folks with no digital skills. On the right-hand side are folks with limited digital skills. And in both cases, you can see that about a quarter of the total, so between 25 and 29%, when you add those green bars together, a quarter of the total of people with limited or no digital skills are under the age of 35. This is not a problem that the retirement calendar is going to solve for us. We cannot make assumptions about older workers because some of them are really comfortable with technology and we don't want to underestimate them. And we can't make assumptions about younger workers. Just because somebody's comfortable with TikTok or sending a text does not mean that they're comfortable with the kind of digital skills they need to be on the job. Next slide. What else do we know about folks with limited digital skills? We know that they represent all different racial and ethnic groups. A plurality are white. Again, on the left, you're seeing folks with no digital skills. On the right, you're seeing folks with few digital skills or limited skills. We also know that workers of color are overrepresented. And the reasons for this are structural. If you live in a neighborhood that doesn't have good broadband access, if you're subject to the racial wealth gap, so you don't earn as much money, you don't have as much wealth, and you can't afford to buy a computer. If you went to school in a K-12 school district that has poor resources, you didn't have a computer lab in your school. These are factors that affect workers of color more and then play out in why they're more likely to have digital skill gaps. Next slide. We also see that digital skill gaps show up very much hand in glove with literacy and numeracy gaps. If you have a high school education or less, if you have limited literacy skills, you are more likely to have digital skill gaps. So that's another really important puzzle piece. Next slide. And we see, not surprisingly, that if you have limited or no digital skills, you're also more likely to have low earnings, right? So you're probably stuck in a low-wage job that doesn't allow you to provide for your family in the way that you might like. Again, here we can see the green bars are showing people in the lowest quintile, that's the lowest fifth of earnings, and the second lowest quintile of earnings. And in both cases, people with no digital skills on the left, people with limited digital skills on the right, you can see that those green bars are longer than the blue bars. That is, more people are in the low earnings category than are in the higher earnings category. So more people who have limited digital skills are also showing up in those low earnings categories. So you can see how it can become a compounding problem, right? You have low earnings. Maybe you just use a prepaid cell phone. Maybe you share a smartphone with several other family members. Now it's harder for you to develop those very same digital skills that you most need to get ahead. Next slide. So I've just taken you on a kind of rocket ship tour of some data and some stories about how digital skills are showing up for workers and job seekers. And I want to emphasize this slide most of all. If you don't remember anything else about this presentation, please remember this slide. People who have limited or no digital skills are often working in jobs that require them to use computers. So how are they doing this? We know from our qualitative interviews that they are spending a huge amount of time covering for and compensating for their skill gaps. They are saying things like, I'm going to take this home and do it tonight. And what they mean is they're going to get a spouse or a child to help them. They're relying on their supervisors or their colleagues to help them. We call this an invisible drag on productivity, right? And so again, the green bars here are showing of the percentage of people with no digital skills on the left or few digital skills on the right, how many of them are employed in jobs that require moderate or complex levels of computer usage. So moderate or complex levels, 38% of workers with no digital skills. That means 1 in 3 workers with no digital skills, and almost 1 in 2 workers with few digital skills are working in jobs that require them to have those very same skills. And this is pre-pandemic data. This is before those businesses sped up their technological adoption. So this is hitting all of our job seekers in almost every industry. And it's going to show up in myriad ways as they engage with the WIOA system. Next slide. People often have fragmented knowledge. Fragmented knowledge is something you may not have heard the term before, but you've seen it many times in reality. Maybe people are very comfortable using TikTok or posting on social media, but they're not comfortable creating a spreadsheet. So the important thing for the workforce system is to think about how your programs and services can help people build bridges between the skills they have and the skills they need. Next slide. So when we think about these issues and we say, what can we as workforce development professionals do about them? I have a couple of very quick suggestions, and then Michael's going to get much more into the nuts and bolts of what this work looks like at the ground level. Next slide. So the first and most important thing you can do is to make sure that your workforce participants have access to services that can help them build foundational digital skills and industry-specific skills. And I can talk more about this in the Q&A if folks want to go deeper. Next slide. The second thing you can do that's really important is to make sure that you as a workforce leader are participating in your state digital equity planning process that's going to be beginning this summer. Illinois will be getting money from a major new federal grant program that passed as part of the infrastructure bill in November. And this is a wonderful opportunity for the workforce system to show up and to make sure that job seekers and workers are represented in your digital equity planning grants. This is non-WIOA money that can help supplement the work that you're doing in the WIOA system. The third thing you can do in the next slide is to make sure you're talking to your business services colleagues, right? What are they hearing from employers about digital skill needs? And is your set of services for workers really reflecting that? Next slide. You can also look at your own program data. What do you understand about how your online or virtual services are reaching people? If you're having online resume classes, but people from a certain zip code aren't participating, is that because of broadband issues? Is that because of people not having devices? What are the challenges, right? Looking at your own program data can be a really important clue on that piece. And then finally, 2 last recommendations. You can use federal COVID relief funds, ARPA money, CARES Act money, to really expand digital skills programs. And again, happy to share examples in the chat or in the Q&A. And the final recommendation is that you can, if you're in a decision-making role, put out guidance so that you're sure that your workforce system partners know how they can spend federal dollars to support digital inclusion. So what's the bottom line? Last slide here. It's important for us to think about investing in workers' digital skills in a whole host of ways. And I've just done a kind of blizzard tour through some of those ways, but I'm going to pass it off to Michael now to talk about, in reality, how does that play out on the ground? I'll also take a look at the questions in the chat and the Q&A. We'll get to some of those at the end of today's presentation, but I'll also probably answer a few in the chat if there's some that are quick. So thank you all for your time. I'm going to hand it back over to Michael.
Okay, thank you very much, Amanda. Um, and I will continue with an example of hopefully cover some of the points that Amanda mentioned, and hopefully back that up with a project that we are working on. And let me get this ready here for you. So my name is Michael Matos, and I work for an organization called Scale It. We have been working with our American Job Centers, and just to paint the picture here, working with 10 American Job Centers in the Cook County area, working with approximately 70 adult ed organizations that are part of our coalition, members in our coalition, and basically trying to bring the awareness of digital equity and inclusion, and everything that goes with that, to the American Job Centers. In return, sharing that information with adult education programs, and having trained clients come back to the American Job Centers. And it's a back and forth relationship, and that's exactly what we're looking for in our partnership. I just want to mention, and I know the slides are saved in the app, but if you want to download these right now, that's a QR code to this particular section of the presentation. If you want to download that and then you have it with you right away through that QR code, just take a picture there and you have it. I also wanted to mention our Illinois Digital Learning Lab website, and I'll explain how that works in this whole scope as well as we go along. Here is the website for that, the website address, and as well as a QR code to take you right to that website. Go ahead and open that now if you like. And okay, so looking at digital literacy classes, and how do we bring the knowledge that the orgs have, the adult ed organizations, in teaching digital literacy out to the American Job Centers, to continue that outreach as we work through this. Okay, so building partnerships between educational organizations and employers. So many companies are building partnerships with institutions of higher learning, because they realize the value of training and education. And as mentioned by Amanda earlier, 1/3 of American workers lack digital literacy skills. And that is just a huge amount. And we also saw that the barriers are not necessarily related to age, and even gender, that the barriers are there, they're all around. And what we're looking at is how to structure an access for everyone to be on, right? So if we look at providing workforce services that help people build digital skills. So as mentioned earlier, looking at the foundational and industry specific skills that are needed. So as we saw from the data that Amanda pointed out to, low earnings, right? Low earnings equal low digital skills. And we need to make sure that is a highlight of what our goals are, right? That we need to get the digital literacy skills, especially those foundational skills, to as many of our clients as possible. So this is the setup of our program and how we're delivering it. So we have navigators. We are currently trying to have at least one navigator at each one of our American Job Centers. These navigators are trained in navigating for various referrals, various needs, different areas of Cook County as well. So we work with referrals, we work with referral follow-ups, data maintenance as we relay this data back to the American Job Centers, back to the adult ed community organizations that are working on the trainings. We're proctoring for North Star, and we're also obviously offering other trainings that are not only for those clients to the American Job Centers, but to the employees of these American Job Centers as well. Providing access to technology tools for home use. So as we look at this, we're working with a number of organizations, just some, and I'll mention this a little bit in our summary at the end here, a little more in detail. We're working with PCs for People. There's just a number of other organizations. I can mention a few, Everyone On, Computers for Classrooms. There's another one called Computers with Causes. What we try to do is make sure that those clients that are interested in signing up for this assistance with technology tools for your home use is to understand how to fill out the applications, how to prove that you're in need, and what are the costs going to be, and look through and figure out what is the best tool that we can acquire for you at those costs. Every single one of these platforms requires a particular amount of information to be gathered in their application process to find out if you're eligible to buy one of these low-cost computers or other tech tools. Assist to attain connection to stable, affordable internet at home, as we talked about the that affordable connections being offered, which we'll talk about a little bit more as well. Looking at this as, and one example is Comcast Internet Essentials. There are so many others. Looking at the Affordable Connectivity Act and the several programs that exist to help make internet service more affordable to low-income housing. There are both government subsidies and low-income internet programs from internet service providers, as I mentioned, the one example, that could obviously lower your internet bill. The new Affordable Connectivity Act program is a good example, which can reduce your monthly costs at a grant, $100 discount towards your new computer or tablet as well can be included in this. So we will walk clients through the inexpensive internet plans, income-based programs, and low-income family plans to help reduce the costs of staying connected. Obviously, as we train our navigators to be those that are there for the clients, and especially in the help with acquiring these low-cost internet options, it's obviously a step that requires a lot of patience and continued training to find out what are the best procedures to have clients fill out applications needed to receive some of these benefits. The next one I'd like to talk about is to help enroll needed interactive digital skills training courses taught by community instructors. So we have a rich referral list, and we keep trying to make it better and an easier way to deliver this data. We are planning follow-ups to these referrals, maybe conducting it at a 30, 60, 90 kind of interval to see where these referrals went, what did the clients achieve from that, and just to see where they're at in the process, as well as we invite them back maybe to the American Job Center for some proctoring and other benefits as well. So that creating that referral and that partnership. The referral lists, they're specific and also include times where these classes are taking place. Accelerated digital inclusion with sustainable access to the digital world and the opportunities and resources it offers. As we have the tech available, how do we get these resources out there? Not only the resources, but the training, so that knowledge, those skills are sustainable to increase the use of these skills at home, at work, and continued learning as well. So just a little bit of a client flow and some of the navigator assistance. So as the client comes into the AJC, the navigator introduces all the resources, including the digital equity and inclusion. As the navigator assists with navigation through North Star and possible practice assessments, we're able to gauge where our client is as far as digital literacy skills. The navigator might schedule a North Star proctored assessments and hopefully pass those assessments. It could be on that same first visit, depending on that initial score, which are taken just as practice tests and not even recorded. And then there could be a proctored test that same day or on another scheduled day, where right then and there, if they pass that particular assessment, they could be awarded certificates and badges. The navigator makes referral schedules and more North Star assessments, and more North Star schedules, more North Star assessments, and more as needed, as far as training and so on. So it's just a quick flow chart. And of course, as we continue to develop this program, this initiative, there's obviously more things that are included as we work through making sure that everything is there that is needed for the continued digital skills clients. We know that the digital literacy is important for careers. Digital literacy skills allow workers to use technology to collaborate, connect with each other, and thus strengthen their teamwork, right? Which is a very important skill in any job. With the diverse workforce that we have, we're keeping all of this in focus, and basically 5 generations working together. Working on these skills is also a way to avoid these generation gaps. And as we talked, as Amanda talked earlier about the ages not really letting us know whether digital skills should be there or not. So there is that 5 generations that are working together right now. Competencies for digital literacy can be so just a little bit on the support and just summarizing some of the information. So the implementation of North Star assessments to gauge strengths. Why North Star, right? North Star was considered best practice to assess current digital literacy skills. We're working on basic digital literacy skills, and we found this to be the best platform for those digital literacy skills. If we want to get into a more contextualized assessment, like something offered through MOS or Coursera or Google's Applied Digital Skills, we definitely want to make sure that we have the basics, that we have an understanding, a confidence to navigate through systems before we go to higher scaffold assessment like the ones mentioned. So North Star seemed to be a perfect fit for that. You can acquire credentials, certificates, and or badges, and awarded pretty quickly and start to use. Part of this rollout, and I think I might mention it a little further on, but I'll include it in here, is our next steps, right? To make sure that we are working with the American Job Centers to educate employers on the importance of these certificates or badges from North Star. So that is also a big part of the implementation of North Star. And help enroll in needed instructive digital skills training courses taught by community instructors. So we have the up-to-date and comprehensive referral lists, referral follow-ups as we move through this. Training, professional development, and more. So we've put together Zoom office hours twice a week to discuss DEI and North Star implementation and use. Our lab notes series, which is a series of presentation/workshops. We have one coming up. I didn't put the date on there, but we have one coming up May 6th, and I can add some more information to my profile on the app here. If you're interested, come back and look at it. These lab notes, we have participants from all over the country that come and present. Next one coming up is on the Affordable Act that we're working on right now, and just some other initiatives that were mentioned earlier. Other learning opportunities for staff and clients, advertised through social media, newsletters, and more. So we're making sure that our social media sites do have that constant, here's a professional development you might be interested in, here's another, and so we continue that outreach. Continue to engage employers to educate on DEI, digital literacy, and North Star. As I mentioned in the first bullet point, our IDLO website and other resources to inform and teach. And our IDLO website is always growing and changing as we continue to bring in more resources that can be looked at and shared for free. And I encourage you to take a look at the site and see what's beneficial there for you. Providing access to tech tools and working with the application process, as I mentioned earlier. And these are just some of the organizations that we have on our list where clients have actually looked into, saw the process of application. There's questions. They all have a different process. And of course, many of them look at the benefits received to be able to see if they're eligible or not. And you can see some of those locations there. We assist to attain connection to stable, affordable internet at home. And as I mentioned, the one example is Comcast Internet Essentials. There are many others. All others tied into the Affordable Connectivity Act. We are obviously looking into and seeing how we can implement that. And that's what our next conversation is going to be on our lab notes series on May 6th, which is the Affordable Connectivity Act. We'll walk you through these inexpensive internet plans, income-based programs, and low-income family plans to help reduce the cost of staying connected. And this is all part of making sure that the programs, the American Job Centers, the adult ed programs, and all the users, the clients, the learners understand these programs, and that's our goal and a big part of DEI. What we are looking forward to, as some of the things I mentioned as we keep implementing to this program, this kind of pilot, is to offer volunteer tutoring and small group learning with navigators and volunteers in these AJC resource rooms, as we look and see how we can find the volunteers, find the right hours of access, where we can work one-on-one or small groups, and hopefully the navigators will be those that put these volunteer groups together and are able to assist as we work with resources and so on to continue to grow the program. We've got some time for questions.
Thanks, Michael. It looks like one question we already have is whether Scale It is expanding beyond Cook County. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, Scale It we run another project called the Illinois Digital Learning Lab, which is statewide. This initiative that we're doing with the AJCs is new, and we're just right now just exploring it with the AJCs in Cook County, and then just working and gathering data, seeing how it works, and hopefully sharing it with the rest of the state. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Other questions, folks can go ahead and share in the chat or submit in the Q&A box. I just want to flag for those of you who might not already have been looking at the written answers to questions here. We did answer a couple of questions, first around how do we sort of help people build digital confidence. There are good models for that. One is really digital navigators, these sort of paraprofessional folks who are peers who can help people build from the skills they have to the skills they need. And some workforce boards, including, for example, the Hennepin County Workforce Board in St. Paul, Minnesota, has done some really interesting work on supporting WIOA system job seekers and others with digital navigation skills. Salt Lake City has done some good digital navigation work. You can get a digital navigator manual and program outline from the National Digital Inclusion Alliance website, and we've dropped the link to that in the chat as well, so that folks can take a look, or rather in the Q&A. So take a look at that if you want to look at existing digital navigation program models, or how other organizations in the workforce system and in public libraries and others have tackled this challenge. We saw another question from an attendee who asked about job seekers and workers with limited English proficiency. There's some interesting work going on a couple of fronts. I have a partial answer. Michael may have more to add. The first is that learning English and digital skills simultaneously is a best practice. And so there are some examples of program models where they're combining ESL and digital skills. I linked to a brief of ours that we put out a couple of years ago called Amplifying Impact that talks about that. There are also programs like Building Skills Partnership, which is a California nonprofit that's done some really cool work with immigrant janitors. Tyson Foods, which is a major employer in the food packing industry, 60 to 70% of their frontline workforce are immigrants and refugees, and they have a very robust digital skills program for multilingual staff. And then the second piece of the puzzle is some folks are working on how to assess digital skills, even if a person really hasn't built their English skills yet. Michael, I don't know if there's anything you want to add from your perspective about digital skills and folks who are English language learners, or any of the other threads of this question.
Yeah, for English language learners, that is the best model to teach digital literacy skills. You're teaching English at the same time, and obviously don't put the second language as an obstacle. They might have some great digital skills already to work with, and obviously we can use those digital skills, and at the same time provide that vocabulary in English to navigate and use the skills. Going back to the navigator part, our navigators, we are working with some of the digital navigator platforms and trainings that are out there. One of them, I believe, is through World Ed. But these are all around navigators. So they're career navigators, they're digital navigators. They provide just some basic digital equity planning as in the process. They're also there to talk to other colleagues, to spread the word out to businesses on the importance of digital literacy and what the assessments that we're using and so on, and what the credit is to those that receive certificates and badges, and also to analyze the workforce data and share it with the American job centers, and in turn work on how we can best continue these programs, and even how we can best use additional funding that may be coming in through the COVID relief fund and things like that.
That's really important. Michael, I want to go back first to a question from Shamir, and then we're going to get to a question from Carrie. So Shamir asks, how do we deliver digital assistance classes when students are at different levels of the beginner spectrum? Do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, and there are different ways to organize your class and your curriculum and your delivery. You can go the student-centered model, where you're trying to work at a particular, each student has their own pace, working on the same projects, the same activities, but working at their own pace, where there's a time for the class to discuss as well. So there's different ways you could deliver this. What I've seen the most success in is one-on-one or one to smaller groups, where you're just sitting at computers, working together to learn these skills and build that confidence. So that is a way to put those at the same level in smaller groups, or the whole class. Another way to reason why you should use an assessment to figure out where your students are at with their digital skills, because then you could follow up on this grouping or class sizes, or whether there's extra help needed where there might be one-on-one. But there's no perfect solution for this or setup. It's the main thing is assessing where your students, your learners are at, and then taking it from there.
That's so important. And I know those of us who are educators are pretty familiar with the challenges of differentiated instruction. And it's always a needle that you're trying to thread to make sure that you're meeting people where they are, while challenging folks who are perhaps farther along in their development and not leaving behind the folks who are more at the entry level. So we had a great question from Carrie about how to help workforce system staff themselves to address the kinds of digital skill needs that we've just been talking about, including fragmented knowledge. There's not a perfect answer, but there are a couple of folks around the country who are working on this. And one in particular that I want to point to is Dan Salenson at the Workforce Professionals Training Institute in New York. He is running a 9-month digital transformation learning group for workforce center staff and workforce professionals. And he's very open to chatting and connecting with folks. So I'm going to put information on his initiative in the chat so that folks can dig into that if they like. There are a lot of ways in which the issues facing workforce center staff are exactly the same as they are for lots of other employers. There are other ways in which they might be a little different. And so having that conversation with a peer who's also in the workforce system can be really helpful. Michael, I don't know, given all of the work that Scale It does with the American Job Centers, if there are specific things you want to share about the challenge of helping workforce center staff themselves to tackle digital skill gaps?
Well, we've run into that challenge, of course. Some are maybe low staffed, or everyone has their own job already, and probably a few. Working with this model, we might be able to get there where, if the model is successful, the American Job Centers might have those positions available, like our navigators would be doing, or just more that are able to assist in the resource rooms, and be able to help clients with one-on-one instruction, or even like completing applications for help with tech tools or internet access. Just having that person there within the AJC would be great. But right now we've obviously ran into those obstacles, and bringing that navigator in, which we've been lucky to so far have a few for the 10 American Job Centers. Not yet for every single one, but we're working on that. That is just a great piece to be able to have that navigator in that position.
That's really important, and I love that you emphasize that, because this is always just it's kind of a moving train, right? Like we're all trying to solve the challenge while we're living it. And
I think as you mentioned earlier, I think we're trying to catch up on 10 years in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
Yeah. So we also have a request for more information on the Illinois Digital Learning Lab. So I will drop a link to the actual webpage in case folks want to dig in that. But Michael, can you just talk a little bit more about that?
So the Illinois Digital Learning Lab is going on. It's ending its third year. It is we build cohorts of learning, and then those cohorts actually put stuff together that they can put into action. So they're action groups as well. We experiment with tech tools, learning platforms. We meet every month in 5 different cohorts with 6 members in each cohort and a subject matter expert. We talk about what we tried to implement in class, digitally related, of course, and we try to look for solutions to obstacles that pose every day related to digital learning. The project has really just gained a lot of traction, and it's really great to see instructors and administrators working together, whether they're on the west side of Chicago or down at the bottom of the state. And they work together. They share their projects. They look and see how they can solve obstacles, and just the projects that are created there. Phonics apps, onboarding initiatives, and just so many other initiatives that are developed almost every week as these cohorts work together to implement digital learning for all their learners, as well as gauging what's new, and how they can bring that into their teaching.
That's great. And again, I did drop the link to that in the Q&A. So if folks are interested, they can check that out. We have time for a few more questions. So if folks want to add anything in the chat or the Q&A box, please feel free to do so. And if you don't have a question, but you do have an observation about the way that these issues are showing up for your job seekers or for your colleagues in the WIOA system, we would both, I think, be curious to hear that. So please feel free to share that in the chat as well. Michael, are there any questions we haven't gotten that you think you'd really like to lift up for folks?
Just continue to look for ways to incorporate, the digital literacy training, and the understanding of digital equity and inclusion to all your clients, all your learners. I guess start with your staff first, and make sure that they understand what we're trying to get at here, what we're trying to make sure that every person has, and if anything, look at your own life and how you navigate a day. How many times you go to the internet, or how many times you use your digital device for some type of production. And that could be very small, from finding a location, to sending in an attachment that you forgot to send in from the office. Now you're able to do it mobile because you have the confidence to use that device. You have the confidence to share important work-based information, or it could be your tax filing. As long as we get everyone to that point where they have not only the tool, the access, but the training, the skills to be able to work in a digital world.
I love that. I think a lot about the difference between production and consumption, right? Consumption is, oh, I'm watching a video on my cell phone. Oh, I'm getting a picture that someone texted me. But production is, I'm creating things. And everyone is capable of engaging in production, but not everybody has the support they need to really get comfortable with it. The other thing I wanted to lift up is I want to go back to something I talked about between the difference between foundational digital skills and industry-specific skills. So depending on where you are in the WIOA system, you may have responsibility for overseeing incumbent worker training funds or individual training accounts, ITAs. When we talk about foundational digital skills, we're kind of talking about that baseline that everybody needs to get comfortable with. Right? Can you send an email? Can you install a new app on your phone? All that good stuff. When we talk about industry-specific skills, this is where you want to make sure that your eligible training providers and your other training partners are really being intentional about combining digital skills with the technical training they've been providing. Right? So yesterday I was attending a terrific event in which Alabama and California community colleges were sharing how they are training emergency medical technicians using immersive technology. So instead of a teacher at the front of the classroom saying, pretend that you're in a grocery store and a child is unresponsive on the floor and you're trying to save the child, they are instead in a white room which has a video projected onto the walls and the floor that makes you feel like you're standing in the grocery store with a real mannequin of a child, and there are scents being pumped into the room so that it smells like the bodily fluids or whatever that a child might be experiencing, right? This is the way that folks are getting trained to be EMTs in some of those training programs. And they're seeing higher pass rates for their underrepresented populations between that kind of immersive technology training versus the old classroom style lecture training that they were doing. So if you are someone who has responsibility for helping clients select an eligible training provider or using their ITA money, or if you're someone who has responsibility for setting the requirements for your ETP list or for your training partners, one thing to think about is how is the technical training, whether it's healthcare, truck driving, whatever, incorporating the digital skills that are not only part of education, but are part of the job once the job starts to happen, right? What kind of digital skills does that EMT need to have once they get on the job? They're going to be in the back of an ambulance with an electronic health record that they need to be reading or updating. What does that look like? We know that everything that workforce leaders already know about training is still true for digital skills, right? You want direct feedback from employers. You want to know whether it connects to industry recognized credentials. You want the training to have contextualized or real life components so that people are learning digital skills that are relevant to what they need to be doing on the job. So those are critically important. So I'm seeing that there are a couple more questions in the chat before we finish up here. The first question is about a link that's not working. I think that may be on your slide, Michael. So I'm going to ask maybe that what you do is either drop the link into the chat now if it's handy, or if it's not handy, maybe you can just update the slide later today and folks can download the slides again.
What link is it?
It looks like the link they're concerned about is the one that's on the slide right now. That's bit.ly.idlldei.
Okay.
Oh, I think it's actually IDLL, and this person has put into the chat IDDL.
Yeah, because I think you could see it on my screen that I just clicked it and went to it.
Yeah, so Omar, if you're the person who put that link, that question in, try doing it again, but instead of IDDL, do IDLL. So 2 L's instead of 2 D's. And that should get you there. And then finally, one last question for you, Michael, before we close out. Somebody asked, are navigators located at AJCs and one-stops throughout LWIA? And now I have to admit, I'm not in Illinois and I have no idea what they mean by LWIA.
So no, there's 10 American Job Centers that we're trying to get a navigator for each one. We currently have 5.
Got it. Okay. All right. I think we are at time. Michael, anything else you want to say? I'm going to say thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully some of you will join me later today for my next session on the Digital Equity Act, when we'll be doing a deep dive into the $3 billion that's going to be coming down to American communities over the next few years. Michael?
Thank you everyone for attending. Please feel free to reach out. Any questions? You have all my information. Thank you very much, Amanda. Great. Have a great rest of the conference.
Thanks, Michael and Amanda, and thank you all for attending today's WIOA Summit session. Make sure to continue engagement and networking on the Whova app, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session.